Good evening, everybody. We'll start the meeting now. It's 6:33. So we'll call the meeting to order. And first item on the agenda is present to speak. If there's anyone here that would like to come on, just introduce yourself, and we'd love to hear from you. Okay. Chairperson report. So I mentioned last meeting to see if anybody had any vacations coming up, to just let me know in an email so I can plan accordingly with our upcoming meetings. So if you do have a vacation planned and you know you're not going to be in attendance for any of the meetings that we have for the upcoming months, May, June, July, that would be helpful to know in advance so we can plan ahead as far as the meeting dates and cancel any if we need to. Also, I spoke with Alice Castles. She did call me and advised that she is still working on the questions, and she actually called me today, and we have a tentative meeting set up with her for next week. And that's me. It's going to be myself and Mike to keep it consistent like we did with the last meeting of the site review of a private parcel. That is also something we're going to do. We're going to meet with Alice, and she wanted to just talk to us about the questions and feedback that she has. So that's going to be, it's tentative for the 29th. And after we meet with her, we'll come back to the committee with her findings. That's all I have for chairperson report. We can move on to approval of the meeting minutes. First item is the SBC Land Assessment Committee meeting that happened on March 14th. I'm not sure if those I can't remember if those came in email. Mike, do you know if those were posted?
They are not on the.
I would. Okay, go ahead, Ralph.
I couldn't find them on the town website, and I did not get them in
Okay.
via email.
I know I am behind on some minutes, so I'll go through the list. I had hoped to do it at the beginning of this week, but some other things intervened. So I'll go through the whole list and make sure everything is caught up. I know I owe a couple.
Okay, so we'll just table that for our next meeting. So let's review the SBC meeting minutes from April 6th. I know those were sent to everybody via email. So let's place that on the table for a vote.
I'll move to approve the April 6th regular meeting minutes.
Thank you, Erica.
A second.
Thank you, Ralph. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Next item is the communications. I received a communication from Mr. Stevens today. He did reach out to the state to get a tentative meeting set up with the state, and they requested a meeting in July. Unfortunately, we were hoping to get it like early April, but unfortunately they're backed up with approvals of the submissions that are coming in for grant applications that they requested it in July. So we'll be setting up a meeting virtually with them just to give them some feedback of where we are to date with our research. So
I did reach out to them again after that email and just kind of explained where we were in the process, that we had two options and that we were considering right now, and just gently said if we could do something earlier than July, that would be great, but didn't want to push my luck. So we'll see if they respond or not.
okay, awesome. All right, let's move to subcommittee reports. This is if the subcommittees have met. We're just looking for a quick update on what your, how your meeting went. And first one is the communications subcommittee.
No meeting.
Okay. Land
have a qu-
assessment. Sorry.
I have a question about communications.
Yep.
I'm just curious where we stand with the outreach to the community. So far, I've seen nothing. No efforts on that part. I'd like to know when we're going to put something out to the public.
Yeah, I believe there's something in the owner's project manager update for tonight, Ralph. So,
Okay.
but note taken. We'll look to hear from Scott tonight on that. So land assessment committee reports, subcommittee reports.
Hi, the land assessment subcommittee has been meeting roughly every 2 weeks, and we have been working with Mr. Pellman on all our meetings. He has been tracking the various efforts looking at publicly owned property as well as assessing some of the privately owned parcels. And he's been working the spreadsheet that you guys have seen before and narrowing things down. It's kind of his version of the spreadsheet that we had worked on before, but it's kind of fine-tuned based on his past experiences. So we're pulling together that information. There have been some executive sessions because of the typical understanding that when we're talking about private parcels, we have to maintain that that privacy to allow the process to have an opportunity, which is allowed obviously by Connecticut general statutes. And so we've moved into looking at some of the private parcels, and it seems to be an effective process. We're learning things about parcels. Things are moving up in priority, other things are moving back, and we will be able to document why. So that's the report.
Thank you, Mike. Finance subcommittee.
We did meet today. I apologize, Justin. Somehow I didn't communicate well with you. We did have a 4 o'clock meeting. And I'll try and get a better notice out of our agenda.
I was just going to say, I apologize for missing it because I did not see the time changed. I know the original was 5:30 and I didn't see until after 5:30 when I logged in that it was changed to 4 o'clock.
And that was my intent, Justin, but I was having so much difficulty posting the meeting with the town that I duplicated the first meeting right down to the time that it stated, and that was successful, but the meeting was less successful. So we will meet again in 2 weeks. And I'm going to move. I'm assuming I don't have to be a special meeting unless anyone, Catherine or Erica, you think otherwise, but that was a problem I had with the town town clerk as well, saying that we were a special meeting. And I don't know why that would be, but that first agenda read that way, that Erica prepared. I'm assuming that was some reason unbeknownst to all of us. So in the future, it's going to be a regular meeting. We're going to do it, Justin, at 5 o'clock prior to our regular meeting. That was my intent. That's why I did the agenda the first time, but it was rejected by the town clerk.
Phil, do you disagree? I think our committee meetings are all special meetings.
They are?
Yes.
We have
You know
not
that-
done. We
Wait,
have
you
not.
Can I finish talking, Ralph?
ahead,
All of our
finish.
meetings are special meetings. Regular meetings are meetings that are noticed, they would have to be adopted as regular meetings. And typically your subcommittee meetings are special meetings.
Well, I'll just share with you what I learned, that from the town clerk, if it's a special meeting, you can't have the first agenda I sent for Justin that said old business, new business, adjournment. If it's a special meeting, it has to have, I guess, topical items beyond just that.
Yeah,
So
and that's okay. I think moving forward, Peter, if there's no sense having a meeting if you don't know what you're going to talk about. So Definitely, if you guys haven't, the agenda is meant to keep us focused. And so if you have a topic, a specific topic that you want to cover, I think on the future ones, just put that topic on there. The one question, Erica, we weren't sure about was about the special meeting category. We weren't sure if all the subcommittees were considered special, and you just answered that, so.
Yeah, so
Well-
you wouldn't add information, on the fly. It's your discussion is whatever was on the agenda, which Peter, I believe is why Robin alluded to. You can't just have a general topic, a new business. You have to put on the agenda. So we'll get those kinks. I know, Peter, we talked about that a little bit today.
In any event, we did have a discussion about per pupil costs, which we discussed in our first meeting. I'll be sending you, Justin and Erica, some additional information about that I pulled together, and we can review it in the next meeting.
I'm curious, has it come up in the finance subcommittee? Maybe comparisons to our neighboring towns of what their costs were? Because I think as a committee, that might be helpful for us to get our arms around how much Mansfield costs and maybe how much Tallinn costs, which we have rough numbers, but I'm just curious what the per pupil cost would have been for them, or square foot costs as well. I don't know if you guys had talked about that at all.
We didn't talk about neighboring towns. We were trying to understand ours, but that's a great idea, Catherine.
Yeah, future discussion.
Yeah,
I mean, it's good to
include-
get a handle on what ours is currently, though. It's good.
I agree. But we'll look at other towns as well to give a sense of where we might want to be if we go to a single building.
Exactly. I just suspect that the townspeople might ask that question in public session, that how does our costs compared to our neighbors that
Oh,
just built, you know what I mean? So it would be
Excellent.
helpful information. It's not anything you guys have to rush into on the agenda. I think it is more important to have, let's find out where we are, and then we can figure out where we're going.
If
But
I
you
may,
said
I agree. And I think, I know Justin and I were on the same tour at Birch Grove and had some questions about what some savings things could be. And so we haven't really met since we had that tour. So I think that will be beneficial conversation for our group when we're all together.
Great, thank you for the update.
Catherine,
Yep, Ralph.
with respect to subcommittee meetings, the communications subcommittee and land assessment subcommittee meetings have all been just meetings, not special meetings. So if that's a picky detail that we have to pay attention to, then we need to do that going forward.
Okay, we'll take a look at it. All right, old business. So we've got owners, project manager, Collier's update. Scott, you get the floor. I
Okay,
have
thank you,
this,
Catherine.
I have the spreadsheet up on my screen. You probably do as well, but you're welcome to share that unless we want to share that in executive session. I didn't go through every line to make sure everything was good, but
Yeah, I think there are just a couple of, you could sterilize it only so much. A couple of references as far as power. When I went on the Eversource website, looked at three-phase power, and then listed availability to certain areas. It may be best just to wait until we go into executive session to review that, just to make sure, because there are
Okay.
some things that might lead someone in a direction towards one of the private sites that we're looking at.
understood.
So I'll start out certainly first with Phil's news. We spoke earlier today. It's very unfortunate. And, unfortunately, having that meeting with the state is tying our hands to a point, before we can really bring some definitive choices to the public. We need to know where we stand with the state. So, if in fact that doesn't happen until July, that's going to make things a little bit difficult. I did earlier today. I started developing a list of questions, what we would anticipate in ways to start selling the project to the public. I sent that off to Catherine and Phil as just an initial draft, but certainly a number of the questions that we're looking to start developing answers to are very specific to what project or projects we may pursue going forward, whether it's a renovation project or a new school project in a certain area. So it was pretty much broken into 4 categories of defining the need, presenting the project, communicating this cost, and then communicating the schedule.
Do you want me to
and-
pull it up, Scott?
I don't think it, I mean, if you feel free to send it off to the committee. You know, again, this was sort of just a first pass at starting to identify some of those questions, and we can start working through responses, you know, with Phil specifically. A lot of it has to do, you know, earliest on as far as answering the question on communications. You know, I think we can start defining the need. You know, why do we need to consolidate the 2 schools? And yeah, Catherine's got it up on the screen now. You know, what is lacking? How will a new consolidated school provide for those current deficiencies? What would happen to existing center school, and what happens to HMS if a new school is built? You know, certainly I think those at this point, we can start developing responses to that. You know, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to really get into any of the specifics beyond that, whether we're building a new pre-K-8, you know, what would this do to traffic? Some of the other things, you know, if we don't know where the new project is, we certainly can't talk about how it's going to be affected by traffic and so forth. Operational savings as well, whether it's operational savings with a renovated school or operational savings potentially associated with a new school. So again, this was, you know, an initial list that I developed, but you know, it's unfortunate. Hopefully we'll hear back from the state that we'll have, we'll be able to at least have those initial conversations a little bit earlier. You know, I have started also developing, you know, we had shared very high level schedules with the committee as far as if we had a referendum in the fall, if we had a referendum in the spring, and potentially what that schedule is to get to the start of a design process or start of construction. You know, certainly if we can't meet with the state until early July, that makes things very challenging for a fall referendum. You know, we were hoping to, you know, start getting out to the community sometime in May and June prior to summer vacation periods, where you lose a lot of the family members and people are away on vacation. So I think it would be a little bit tenuous to think about a fall referendum if we don't get into the state until July, which probably puts us past the holidays into the spring, a little bit closer to a, you know, May, June referendum prior to filing the grant. And then certainly that has a cascading effect on the schedule, because that would change things by, you know, approximately 6 months. Have also started looking at some cost comparisons, very high level, very preliminary. Again, nothing that we're going to want to put out to the town at this point, because we don't have a defined site potentially for a new project, and we don't have buy-in from the state of whether they would look to do a renovation or not. And certainly the project schedule from an escalation standpoint, inflation standpoint, that's going to be critical. I do have, as you know, I am involved in the Mansfield project, so I can certainly provide a comparison. But again, that project was budgeted 2 years ago, was bid over, you know, a year and a half ago. And currently now, you know, I think everybody understands where we are with global inflation, still procurement issues. So, you know, escalations would certainly have to be a key factor in comparing the 2 projects, because right now we're looking at, you know, somewhere 6 to 8% escalation for this year is being projected. So I have started on that effort, but again, you know, it's a little premature. Hopefully we'll hear some positive news from the state that we can get in and at least have an understanding. And then once we get into the executive session, we can discuss a little bit more about hopefully getting a potential site for a new building a little bit better defined, where we can again start putting together some more concrete estimates as far as an overall project budget. Phil and I spoke about the EdSpec development. I know he's been diligently working on that this week. I think, again, as part of a meeting to define the need, I think once the Board of Ed has a chance to review the ed spec a little bit more, then it may make sense to look to have an initial public meeting just talking about the need of the project and the ed spec and what an ed spec would be for either a renovated or new building. Again, I think it would try and incorporate the same components. The implementation of some of those components certainly would be more challenging in the existing building than in a new structure. But certainly something we're looking at. And go ahead, Phil, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the next ed spec Board of Ed discussion is May 3rd at 6 p.m. Not all the board members have verified that yet. I just saw a board member drop her hand, so hopefully she can make it. But that's the next ed spec discussion for the board.
Okay. So again, I agree, with Ralph. I would love to get something scheduled. It's just a matter of, how much information at the moment do we have that we can really bring to the committee and, bring out to the community. I apologize. Except for, again, just talking about the need and what this project would do. But I think beyond that, until we meet with the state, some of those questions that we're anticipating in that list that Catherine just had on the screen, a number of those questions, which, the townspeople are going to want to know sooner than later, we're not going to be able to answer.
Thank you, Scott. So
Any
when do
questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So when do you anticipate, well, there's two questions. Is there anything that we could have a correspondence or maybe a question and answer to the public at this time, or you feel like we don't really have enough information at this time to go public to answer any questions without having that state input? That's kind of what I heard.
Well, I think that the state input's important. I think an initial meeting, potentially could be scheduled, again, once the ed specs to a point where the requirements of the renovated or new building have been clearly defined. We can talk about the shortcomings of the existing facilities and start educating the public on the need to do something. But unfortunately, we don't know exactly what that something is at the moment until we have that meeting with the state.
Anybody else have any feedback from what Scott just shared with us? Mike?
Just a
Oh,
quick
sorry.
question. Yep. I'm just thinking about some of the feedback we've been picking up in the budget hearings and meetings over the last few weeks as we set the town budget. People are curious, obviously, and as is typical, there is some misunderstanding of the process or the costs. People hear bits and pieces of information. So I'm wondering if maybe instead of going to the point of calling a meeting, which it seems would be premature, I agree, perhaps maybe there's just an opportunity here for us to send out a little status update to the public. Maybe it's in the form of an email and updating our various communication platforms that just says, hey, this is where we are in the process. And it basically would summarize what Scott just said.
Yeah, Mike, that's a great idea. And we did do that in the Willington Wire. There was a
Yep.
pretty detailed list in the Willington Wire of where we stand with things. Was there another platform that you were thinking we should share it on?
Well, I was thinking of something much simpler and shorter that basically is, in a sense, it's responding a little bit to the questions that the public has. There are always people who ask about what's going on with the roof project. Are we doing other renovations at the schools while we're waiting to figure this out? So maybe just something incredibly simple, bullet points, like maybe 6 bullet points. Other capital projects at the school, for the most part, are holding off while we make the decision. The roof project is currently canceled until we determine if we're building a new school. We are working on the ed spec, which feeds into the process. We're waiting for a meeting with the state, which feeds into the process. In the meantime, we're evaluating properties as well as ideas for the current school. Like maybe that simple.
Yeah. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but
It's
I
just a
don't-
thought. I don't think
Yeah.
it's critical. It's just a thought.
Yeah, no, it's good feedback. I just, the only part I was questioning was the first two items. I'm not sure if it's our position as a committee to address CIP items. Maybe.
I agree.
Erica
It
or-
might just. I agree. It's not really in our purview, but it could maybe even be in there as an FYI because we know the questions have been asked. This is not the purview of this committee, but this is what we understand or something, or maybe it just has to be eliminated. I'm just trying to think of what's the simplest bullet point way to get that information out there for the people who have
Yeah.
busy lives or short attention spans.
In a lot of cases, what we do is we would, on the board website, open up a tab for project updates. And again, I'd be happy to work on that bulleted list and work with Phil and Catherine. But, maybe Phil, if we could just open up a section of the board website just geared towards building project, and that's what it's under, and then just post the information there. I think that's a good avenue. And again, it's through the board, so it sort of ties it in, with those capital improvement projects or, what things have been put on hold.
Erica, you had your hand up?
Yeah,
Hold on, Ralph.
I think all of the information Mike is talking about is currently wrapped up in our meeting minutes. We're, very clear about
Mhm.
where we are and where we stand. I think the article we put in the Willington Wire, we can share across different platforms. I'm not opposed to Scott's suggestion of, some simple bullet points. I think until we're ready to give more information, there isn't any more to know. I think our minutes, cover that and the simple communications we put up. That's my 2 cents. And I think we should wait to have any kind of meeting when we have a lot more information to go to the public with.
Yeah, and Erica, to your point, maybe that would be our response, Mike, like if you get questioned about it, just, maybe refer people to the meeting minutes or invite them to our meetings. That might be the
Yes,
best way, because sometimes a single bullet point is not going to be enough information for them to know what they want to know.
I would
Ralph, you had
agree.
your hand up?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I would agree. The only reason I'm bringing this up is, and Erica has seen this, including at the budget meeting, at the town meeting last night, people are not reading the minutes. People are not watching the YouTube videos. People are busy, or they have a short attention span, or they hear something from a friend and it gets them thinking about it and they ask questions. And maybe that's not our fault. I'm just saying, I just am bringing up for consideration that maybe another way that we reach our people is by very simple short attention span items, including the last bullet can say, if you want more detail, please read the minutes, please watch the YouTube videos. We got plenty of budget questions last night about things that have been talked about since February 3rd in 9 budget meetings. And these people cared about the budget last night. They had concerns, but they clearly had not read the minutes of the 9 budget meetings and had not watched the YouTube videos because they asked questions that the answer was already out there, as Erica said, and she's absolutely right. It is out there. Again, I'm not trying to argue strongly that we have to do this. I'm just trying to explain why I think it might be a good idea. And if we decide not to do it, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, I would, in response, hang on one second, Ralph, I'll get to you, just 1 second. So in response to that, I think it's a point well taken, and maybe our communications subcommittee can take a look at that. That might be something that we can post somewhere or embed it into our updated facts page and get that out there. So just a suggestion, Ralph.
Okay, we have right now 12 very technology astute people involved in this discussion, and that's wonderful. If we put bullet points on the school board website or the town school website, that's great, but let's also put something on the town government website, and that may pick up a few more people. But as Mike observed in his meetings, just because we posted it on websites doesn't mean people are catching it. seeing it, looking for it. And there are a substantial number of people who just don't go there for information. I think it's behooves this committee to push out information as best we can to all quarters and not just those that are tech savvy.
Ralph, good point. Do you have any other suggestions of, like, are you thinking mailings or what are you
I
thinking?
don't see why a mailing would be a bad thing. At least it might encourage a little curiosity as far as what this committee's up to. And that may get people to seek out a little bit more information. I mean, judging from the public attendance at these meetings, we're not getting followed very closely. And I think we should be, because everybody's going to pay for what we decide.
Erica?
Sure. I'm not opposed to sending information by the mail. And I think when we have a lot more information to share, that is the way to go to make sure information gets into the hands of all our residents so that they're well aware and we do these presentations. I don't think we have enough to warrant the cost of a townwide mailing at this point. I think we need a little bit more information. Scott has shared with us that we're, not quite to the point of that kind of public interaction. I don't see anything we have currently that would necessitate the kind of cost we'd be talking about.
And we did already do it. Just a reminder, the Willington wire did go out. So that hits a lot of people.
That's only electronically. And I think what Ralph is talking about is more than just that. So
That's correct.
Certainly there are many people that don't sign up for that. But we have, we're certainly sharing this information on all the typical avenues. A mailing into mailboxes is costly. I think we need to have a lot more information than we don't really have a lot of information to give you. We're still talking about things. It just doesn't seem a prudent use of our dollars currently. That's my standpoint.
Just that raises a question, Erica. What does a postcard mailing cost us?
You're gonna need more than a postcard, Ralph.
No. I'm talking for a quick update on a postcard. What does that cost us?
Yeah, I don't have a cost factor for you right now.
I can answer that. It would be probably less than $800 to do a color postcard. And that would be the creation of the postcard and the mailing through one of the services like anything printed in town, or one of the other services like Staples. It would probably be under $800.
I think if we want the support of the townspeople, that it would be wise to at least give them some idea of where we're at right now and what we've still yet to go through. Just me.
Justin?
I just think at this point, you're going to get just like the Board of Finance and everybody else until something comes up where we're talking about spending large sums of money. Nobody's going to really listen.
Right. If people want to know information,
probably right.
If they want to know information, we do have these meetings. We do have the meeting minutes. We've published a few things already. But definitely, I mean, your points are well taken. We definitely have to get a push out there to the townspeople when we have some real information. We're still right in the middle of researching what we've got at Hall. We're in the middle of trying to find out how our finance is going to come into play with where we stand. We're in the middle of trying to find potential land. We just started looking at new schools just to give us an idea of what a new school would look like. So I feel like we're kind of in the middle. I agree with Erica. We're kind of in the middle of the process of what we're doing, but certainly there will be a broadcast posting to the town. And once we do have those public meetings, I think that'll help. Scott, I don't know if you have any feedback on what's being discussed with respect to this.
No, I don't think at this point, I don't have anything further to add, but, certainly, we can assist in, putting together, any type of a bulleted list or pamphlet, once you decide it's an appropriate time to to put something out in that forum.
Okay, so let's move on. We have potential
Oh.
executive, sorry.
Catherine, Peter.
Just,
Oh, I'm sorry, Peter, go ahead.
okay, just one
Thank you.
question. I agree with the kind of the consensus that it's hard to reach out to the public until we have something to reach out with. And I think what's most frustrating for me in that respect is I know we're waiting for these ed specs. I know it's a lot of work for the Board of Ed, but Scott had mentioned, or Scott, you had mentioned in the last meeting that you and Phil were working off a basic outline of that already that encompasses essentially what that is. Can that be shared with this committee so we can start understanding it better?
I think that's a question for Phil.
I mean, it's not approved by the Board of Ed. So you, just like Scott's point to say, we don't want to put something in public until we have real numbers, because once you put it out there, it's out there. So, I mean, you could, I mean, if you're just looking at square footage right now, I think
Yep.
maybe
Kind of.
I mean, if that, I think if you're just looking at square footage based upon the programs we have today, I don't see why we couldn't share that, because we have the programs we have today, and it's raw. But again, it doesn't mean that what my concern is I'm not sure the ed specs is what's holding us up right now. I think the point is people want to know, are we looking at building a new school or are we looking at renovation? And I think this conversation started because there were some questions at recent meetings where people want an update on things. Maybe they don't like some of the answers they've been told. But I think that the more we can blanket people with where we are, I don't see why that can't hurt at this point. But I mean, until the board approves the ed specs or you know, has a further discussion on it, you know, they're the ones that are going to control what programs are, you know, they want in their building. It's not me, it's the board.
And if I could just add on to that a little bit, again, the other critical consideration here is why it's so important to have that meeting with the state, because we know, and we've talked about it in the past, that we're not going to be able to get to the state standard, nor do a lot of schools. They exceed it a little bit and your reimbursement rate goes down. But we have to understand with the state how far or where that sweet spot is where they say, yes, we will accept the project. Because that may force an ed spec to have to cut some programs or make some very challenging decisions. So if we came out right now and we said, we want to build, and I'm just going to throw a number out, this number doesn't have any validity to any ed spec, but we're going to build an 80,000 square foot building, and the state says, absolutely not. We think that's too big for 405 students. You have to be at 72,000. And to get to 72,000, we might have to downsize some spaces, or, you know, and again, so that's really why it's really critical. And I was very disappointed, as you know, Phil can attest to, we talked earlier. And I said, I'm really disappointed. See what you can do to get us in with Michelle, because we've got to have that initial conversation. Because if we went strictly by the ed spec, which puts us, I think, in going off memory, somewhere in the 60,000 square foot range, which is in essence the size of your existing middle school. And I think everyone knows, if you walk through and see how the existing middle school is being used, you can't take your pre-K through 4 school and move it all in there in the same amount of space. It's not going to work. You know, there has to be an addition, not just from an accessibility standpoint that we've talked about previously, but there just isn't enough space in the building. And again, when you get to the smaller numbers of students, your cafeteria, your gymnasium, your main office, those spaces that you have to have, you could have all of those spaces for a school that was sized for 400 students, and you would have those exact same spaces for a student body of 600. Well, a student body of 600 is going to buy you a lot more square footage on the space standard from the state. And so when you get into smaller populated schools, it becomes a real challenge to get enough square footage to meet your requirements based on your basic infrastructure needs. So, you know, boiler room can only be so small. The gymnasium can only be so small.
Thank you, Scott. So if there's no other questions on this topic, we'll move on to the next item. I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session per CGS 1-200 6D, discussion of the selection of a site.
You're gonna invite Scott?
And invite Colliers.
Second.
Second, thank you, Mike. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays, abstentions? Okay, we're gonna pause the meeting, so if there's anybody on the call that's not a committee member,
Melissa, our public back into the meeting.
It's 8:29.
8:29, we're returning from executive session. And we will move into new business. We have 2 items for new business update on frequently asked questions document. This is a document that we had issued early on in our meeting discussions, I believe last year. You know, when we get new information, it gets updated. And so, as you guys know, the Willington Wire was posted early April, and there are some items on there that we turned into questions and are ready to, or at least are proposing to add those questions to our frequently asked questions document. Phil, I think, did you have a draft you wanted to share, or?
Yeah, I'm just gonna read them too, whatever's easier.
Yeah.
So there was 3 questions I think we talked about last meeting that we put on here. These are not the answers. They're just copied in from what's on the Willington Wire, so disregard what's in italics. We basically just added in the date to the top of the frequently asked questions. And then what we'll do, as long as these are the questions you want the communications committee to answer, we will answer these for you for next time. So the 3 questions were, why did the committee hire an owner's project manager? And how will they support the process? The second question was, what was the result of the student enrollment study that was presented in January 2022? And what are educational specifications, who creates them, and how are they utilized? Any other questions that you want in the FAQ document that are not already there, or modifications to those?
I think that means we're all good.
Jeopardy
That's-
music.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Yeah, and it could be questions that you've heard at other meetings too, that, you know, you think should be addressed. You can always shoot me an email. I checked my email before this meeting and there was nothing. So if something comes up, just keep us posted. That's, you know, we can update it monthly if we need to, but the intent is to update it as we have new information. So Phil, it sounds like the next step will be to take those 3 questions and set up a subcommittee meeting with you and Ann to just
Correct.
come up with the language. Okay. Next item, hybrid meetings. I think I'm going to turn this one over to Erica.
So the bill has passed. I apologize, either the House or the Senate. Has not passed the other. So at this point, I have nothing new to report. It does seem as though it will pass, but as of right now, we're still in the same boat. After April 30th, we have to go back to full in-person meetings. That doesn't mean we shouldn't plan for what we want to do as a committee in the event we can continue to have remote, in-person, or hybrid.
So if it doesn't pass before the 30th, we have to go back
Correct.
in person.
Correct. And that doesn't mean we can't still record our meetings. From my perspective, we can meet in person, utilize some of the tools we still have here at the town hall, and record the meeting on Zoom, but instead of 11 different blocks, it would be 1 block of the whole meeting. So the meeting could still be recorded and the public could view it after the fact. But in order to participate in the meeting, you'd have to be in the room.
Even for
Correct.
publics.
Yeah, once the hybrid option goes away, it goes away. I don't think that will happen, but I can't tell you it's in effect yet because it's just not.
So Erica, can you just clarify, you said when it goes to the House to vote, what are they voting on?
They're voting, so there's a bill before the legislature that would take away that sunset date of April 30th and extend the ability for towns to hold their meetings in this manner. The capacity for board members to call into a meeting has always existed, but not the public participation part. And so in order to participate, if this bill does not pass, we go back to where we were pre-COVID. Our meetings happen only in person in public. And then to participate from the public perspective, you have to be in the room. Again, I don't anticipate that will happen. That will, I believe we'll still have options, but until something is signed, we have to assume we're going back.
So is there any chance you can maybe just send me an updated email so that at the time, whenever the vote comes through?
Right, so as soon as we know that information, our town clerk will alert all boards and commissions so that they're aware of whether or not they have to revert back or what means they can use moving forward.
Okay, sounds good. And once I get that, I can communicate that to the rest of the committee members, because we are meeting on May 4th.
Right.
Right, so don't we need to make a decision tonight? If it's extended, we need to make a decision not tonight, Catherine, of how we're gonna handle that. If the hybrid is still allowed, or how is this group going to meet? It's very easy. If it's not continued, we have to go in person. Like that's just no decision to be made. But the decision is, if they do extend it, if they do continue the option, what are we going to do as a school building committee?
Okay, I understand. So is there a motion in consideration for going in one direction or another?
You want to do a poll of the members to see what the preferences are? My preference is if we can do Zoom, I'd like to continue with Zoom.
My preference is if we can be in person, I'd rather us be back in person.
Justin?
I like the hybrid option. I'm good with both though.
I know this sounds strange, but I don't see this as much about the committee as I do about the participation and with the public. And so if you go back fully in person, you just need to make the determination if you're going to allow public participation via the hybrid model through Zoom or not. And so I think whatever model we do should allow the most opportunity for public participation, which to me is the hybrid model. So board members, you know, if the hybrid is an option, you could Zoom from home or wherever you are, or you could be in person. I know Erica, it doesn't like it so much. It's a little annoying on our side when we're in the building. But it's possible, I think, for the opportunity for the public to participate. And they're allowed, Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, if you do fully in person and you're still doing it through Zoom, they could watch. They just could not do public to speak. Is that correct?
Well, if we were fully in person, we wouldn't really be allowing them in that Zoom method, right? We might use that as just a means of record. And so I guess I should change. My option is for the committee to be in person. So when I say in person, I'd rather we be in person, but I'm with Phil allowing, you know, the hybrid model. Our ARPA commission is using the hybrid model where the majority of board members works, and it's been working. I would just prefer to see as many of our board members in the room together as possible. I think there's something to be gained from in person. But, you know, I guess the hybrid model would be what I'd want, because I do love the ability for those who can't come into the room from the public standpoint to participate. So I would rather see our committee together in the room.
can I just add one other point? Is
Yeah.
that I also respect Scott Pellman's time and allowing him, if he so chooses, to Zoom from his living room versus driving out to Willington. Should be an option if that's what he looks forward to as well.
Eric, I have a question. If
Yes.
we go with the hybrid model, does that mean the committee members can choose to be hybrid, or are we saying all the committee members report in person, but anybody else that wants to come to the meeting can do it hybrid?
No.
And are other hybrid, if it's hybrid, are the meetings still recorded?
Yes, so hybrid would be just what we're doing now, only some
Good
people
now.
would be in the room and some would be on computer. Again, I'll tell you, our ARPA commission has been hybrid for the last, well, month or two now. And we have on average 3 members, maybe 4 members who Zoom in, and the others are in person because it's a number of them are staff, and it has worked okay. When you get a large number of public, it tends to sway things. We're still not seeing that. I think as we get closer to a project, defined project, we'll see more participation. But yes, if we do hybrid, then everyone, both public and board members, have an option. I don't know how we would ever dictate how the board members participated. It would have to be an understanding of the board. But if it's an option, it's an option. And it was always an option for board and commission members to call into a meeting. That always existed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So there's a couple of people we didn't hear from. Peter.
In person.
Okay. Brianna.
The magic of Zoom has allowed me to attend way more town meetings than I ever could before. And I'm really grateful and thankful for that technology. And I really think that there were a lot of parents, especially of young children in town, that were in the same boat. There was nowhere to take our kids for daycare. They're in the bath. They're coming home from soccer. And that's why I think I'm a huge advocate for hybrid, at least, please.
Okay, thank you. Erica Bouchier.
I'm an advocate for the hybrid model also.
Thank you. Anne? One
Can't
for
hear you.
hybrid and 2 for in person. Who did I miss? Anybody? Guess I didn't really vote, so I would go with hybrid as well. I'm pretty flexible. I could do either, but hybrid does make my life easier as well. So I don't know if do we want to put a motion on the table for continuing hybrid if it does pass? Because we don't have a choice if it doesn't pass, right?
Correct. So I'll move that we, if possible, begin our meetings in a hybrid model.
I'll second. Any discussion? We kind of had a discussion now.
Well, I would add that if it has to be hybrid and not Zoom, I would prefer to be there in person simply because I have a little bit of a hearing loss. And Erica, this is not personal, but your voice in a hybrid meeting is very difficult to understand when you're seated at the table and you're talking. And it's probably more my reduction in hearing capacity than it is anything else, but I would be there in person if that's the direction we go.
Ralph, that's what I tell my husband.
Shout.
No, that's what I tell my husband. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm losing my hearing. I can't quite hear you. And it's only his voice. I don't know why.
My wife calls it selective hearing, so.
Well, listen, Ralph, it's pretty good until you lose your voice and then you have to hold several meetings in a couple days span.
When you were screechy, yeah.
Yeah, it was not good. The people next to me didn't understand what I was saying.
Any other discussion before we take a vote?
Ask a question.
Go ahead.
I assume that's on a meeting by meeting basis, right? You don't have to make a decision. If we were to go hybrid, you could choose each time, but would someone at town hall there need to know ahead of time if you were coming in 3D real life?
No, the building would be open. If we go hybrid, we have to make the building accessible. And I would, I'm sure either Phil or I, if I couldn't be in attendance, would make sure that the building was open. With that said, the May 12th or May 18th meeting I won't be at, so someone else will have to, i.e. Phil.
And unfortunately, I won't be at either. And Phil was kind enough to step up to the plate, and he's going to run that meeting for us. Or for me, I should say.
We should see if we're gonna have a quorum that meeting too.
Right, is anybody else have a conflict on May 18th?
Excuse me.
Not that I know of, but
And-
anything's
and-
possible.
And say one for yes, you have a conflict, or two for no, you have a conflict on May 18th? Yes, okay. All right, so anybody else have a conflict?
You
I
have
guess
two
we'll have-
members. Yeah, we'll have to check with Gary and Mike because
Yeah.
you need everyone else to show up. Otherwise you don't have a quorum, I think.
Right, so Anne, no. And Erica. I can ask. And Gary, right? Because they're the one that's missing. Okay. All right, and just a reminder, I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and is just if you do have conflicts for any other future meetings, just send me an email and let me know in advance. I think, so we have a motion on the table.
Yes.
We have a second, and now we have to vote. So we'll do a individual vote because I think the room is kind of split. So let's start with, well, Phil can't vote, Scott can't vote, Peter.
Yes.
And this is a yes to hybrid, right? So I guess that's the question is, are we going to continue with hybrid? So Peter is a yes. Justin?
Yes.
Yes. Erica?
Yes.
Ralph?
I'll acquiesce and go with this, yes.
Brianna?
Yes.
Erica? B?
Yes.
Okay, Anne, one for yes, two for no, okay? Anne is a yes. And then I am also a yes. So it's unanimous, I believe. So the motion carries to continue with the hybrid, regardless of the, well, I guess if they vote to allow us to continue with the hybrid meetings. Last meeting agenda is future business items for future agenda. I mean, we'll have our typical items, our present to speak, chairman's report, approval of meeting minutes. We'll have our typical items, but is there anything anybody else wants to include for our next meeting, Ralph?
Gary Anderson had talked about reaching out to some developers regarding the potential market demand
Yeah.
for a building like Hall School.
Okay.
In our last meeting, he hadn't gotten anything. I think it might be smart to keep that on the agenda.
And that was,
Ralph,
that was in reference to our reviewing
Reuse.
our existing, reviewing our existing facilities in the event we go to a new school, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, I can put that on there. Thank you.
And another thing I think we should start to consider, if we're going to be truly sincere about exploring what opportunities we might have with Hall, is I think we're probably going to need something more definitive in ed specs, but we should start entertaining the idea of getting a skilled architect involved with reconfiguring existing buildings, repurposing buildings. Someone who can see a future in that building, not necessarily in its current form, but in a restructured form. I I think before we totally discard that concept, we should get someone involved. And if you're looking for some architectural firm names, I'm sure between Scott and I, we can come up with a few.
Is that an agenda item that you want to add?
Well, I think
or
it's a
you just-
discussion that we need to keep on the table.
Yeah, I mean, eventually we're gonna have to do that, right? Same with the new site. We're gonna have to bring in, that's kind of like,
I just don't
similar
want
to-
I just don't want the committee to become enamored with this beautiful site and forget about our mission. That's all.
So can I just clarify, Ralph, you're talking
Go ahead.
about for use as a school, right? So we're talking about if
Yes.
we, right. So
Yeah.
I would say the same thing. We have to determine, and I think that conversation with the state comes before we start spending money on an architect for either new or used site. I think we know we'd have to go in that direction, but I think we're a ways off from spending more dollars on either site.
No, I'm not suggesting that we immediately go out and seek proposals on something like that. I just want to keep that idea afloat. That's all.
Yeah, okay. But I just want to be clear, is this, we're definitely, I mean, you can bring it up again, but is this something you want me to put on the agenda items?
I'm just throwing it out there. You can choose to put it on the agenda, or I can just be a PETA and add it when the meeting shows
I
up.
think that's within Scott's charge, right? As we get to a project, we would be talking about whether or not we need architects.
Exactly.
Can I ask Scott, would
Yes.
we bring any architects in before we determine that was a project?
I wouldn't recommend that because it'll, taking it to that level will be quite expensive. But no, it is within our scope of services to assist you in procuring design professionals to pursue any of the options that have been deemed viable. So, yeah, we can write an RFP, we can put that together, we can solicit again. As Ralph said, yeah, we know all the architects in the state. So we can certainly line someone up, but yeah, I would hate to spend that money and have the state say there's just no way that they would support renovating that older building.
Right. All right,
Well,
any other items to put on the future agenda? Got the developer review so far. If something comes up, can't think of it tonight, if something comes up, just shoot me an email. So next item, present to speak. Is there anybody still on the line that would like to say a few words? Adjournment is our last item, so I guess we'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Any objections?
I'll second that.
Hello.
All right, have a great week, couple weeks, you guys. And we'll see you on the 4th. Thank you.
Yep. Good night.
Meeting adjourned 8:51.